There is a saying that I have been saying for a while now that I'm starting to realize is changing my life. That saying is, "That's familiar." And I notice that when I say it, it kind of like acts as a trigger to show me that whatever it is that I'm about to do or whatever it is that I'm doing is familiar. And of course, this goes back to the whole matter of, family of origin, what it is that I'm doing, understanding why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing. That's the most important thing right there. What's interesting is that I've noticed this to be kind of like a theme that has been practiced in my life in the past as well. About a decade ago, I kind of like created a trigger for myself where, like, say for instance, if I was thinking about something from the past, right, like and anything, right, I would basically go like this. That's not what's happening right now. And that would bring me back to the present moment. And it actually helped me grow a lot. It helped me grow a lot more present, which that in and of itself has really allowed me to cultivate much more of a lifestyle centered around presence, right? So let's look again at this saying that I've been saying that is changing my life. That's familiar. So similarly to that's not what's happening right now, reminding me that it doesn't matter whatever it is that my mind is replaying, right? And it's interesting too, like you might find yourself coming out of a situation with somebody and maybe you like reflect on it and you're like, oh, well, I could have said this, I could have said that, I could, whatever. Um, it's just like, it's really cool to be able to snap yourself out of it and come back to the present moment. But for this whole saying of that's familiar, this has a lot to do with like the area of Dr. Joe Dispenza, creating a new self, a new personality. I didn't read his book, which I am going to, but I didn't read his book yet. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I haven't read that one yet, but I'm excited to. And that's really what this is all about. It's about creating that trigger of, excuse me, creating that trigger of that's familiar, basically breaking the habit of familiarity, stepping outside of what it is that a person is used to. Um, Again, going back to what I've said before, what you're used to will use you. Comfort and familiarity, in this case, specific. I mean, there is comfort inside of familiarity, so they're kind of like both. They go together. But there is so much, at least in my opinion, there is so much seductive energy inside of familiarity, right? Because, like, say for instance, you're used to taking warm bubble baths, right? They're nice and cozy. They're warm. They're wonderful. You can relax in them, right? And then you start taking ice baths. It's gonna be different. For a lot of people, it's not gonna be fun, you know. So that's stepping outside of familiarity. And the reason why I've been saying to myself that's familiar is because I'm trying to, which it's working, I'm trying to trigger a change in direction. So let's say, for instance, what I'm comfortable and familiar with is getting into my car and listening to music that makes me feel good. What I'm trying to do is learn a language, which is Spanish. And I've been going really hard at it for like 2 years, like literally every day. It's wild. And so the familiarity element is listening to music. Because it's usually, I mean, I change back and forth between different genres. I have a tendency to be able to appreciate all music. Um, but yeah, so like I do that. And then that just so here's the interesting thing about this is that you can do what's familiar all you want, but it's only going to yield the same results. It is. If you continue to feel the same feelings, you're going to experience the same experiences. Familiarity. It's sometimes not really what I want to do, to turn off the music and to just speak to myself by myself in my car in Spanish. Because my Spanish is not exactly where I want it to be yet. It's it's drastically better from what it was before, but it's not exactly where it is that I want it to be yet. And part of me is like, I don't like that. I just want it to be there already. But then another part of me is like, well, in order to get there, you have to put in the work to, to practice, to study, to actually say it, right? And it's just so fascinating because there's actually a very specific energy dynamic that comes with doing the work. And it's an energy dynamic of fulfillment. Like, I've noticed that when I go throughout an entire day and I don't do the things that I know I want to and need to do to progress myself closer and closer to my goals or objectives, I feel slacked. I don't feel the best that I could feel. And so, like, I'm really doing the best that I can to utilize this saying as a tool to remind me that all the while remaining gentle with myself. I'm not trying to be hard on myself, but I am trying. It's kind of like a reminder. It's like, hey, you just put music on in your car. We could do this instead, and it would help you get closer to achieving your goals of being a fluent Spanish speaker, right? Again, there is a high level of seductiveness. I think that's a word. It's very seductive to give into what's familiar. It is. Familiarity knocks at your door like the comfort and beautiful feeling of a bubble bath. And sometimes it's very challenging to not choose that bubble bath. Especially if the alternative is to step into an ice bath. All right? I can imagine that a majority of people would much rather prefer a bubble bath, a nice warm bubble bath that you can relax in, as opposed to an ice bath. Ice baths are wonderful, by the way, incredible health benefits. But this is a matter of familiarity. Depending on what a person allows themselves to do, right? You can look at it and you can be like, that's familiar. It is familiar. And what does it mean that it's familiar? What is it doing for you because it's familiar? Is it keeping you inside the same ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving? It's a good chance that it is, yeah. Now, what does that mean altogether? Well, if you look at patterns of behavior in people, it's kind of like this. And it's funny that I bring Newtonian physics into this because I appreciate the contrast between the Newtonian model of reality and the quantum model of reality. One of them is causing an effect. The other one is basically affecting a cause. But, so Newtonian physics, an object that, is in motion, remains in motion until obstructed by something, right? And so it's like familiarity is that movement going forward until something stops it and makes it question itself. And I think that that's a really good way to look at this because it really gives, it displays a decent understanding or a decent insight into like what's actually going on here. Somebody who does things that are from a place of familiarity. By the way, it's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's more so just about what a person is trying to create. That's really what this is all about. So, like, if what you're trying to create is different from what it is that you're familiar with and the familiarity is running your life, there's a good chance that you're just not going to create what it is that you want to create because the familiarity is far too comfortable for you. It's the bubble bath. You've been used to that. You love it. It's one of your favorite things to do. Why would you take an ice bath, right? So looking at it like that, an object that is in motion will remain in motion until it's obstructed by something. The obstruction is that's familiar. And that, like, you could be, like, totally on autopilot, right? In familiarity. And you'll just be going, you'll be going. And there's not even the guarantee that if that's familiar comes in, that it's even going to change anything. This is what's so interesting about it. It takes a certain level of awareness to really transform one's own life. And that's the reality of it. But I'm really excited that this trigger is here, because the last trigger that I had from That's Not What's Happening Right Now, that, in case I didn't mention it, which I feel like I may not have, that trigger came after I read Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. That trigger came to me. Like, it wasn't something, I don't remember it being something that was like suggested in the book. I just created the trigger. I was like, that's not what's happening right now. And so now what I'm doing is, that's familiar, right? And the reason I'm doing that's familiar is to step outside of familiarity and see all options. When we're caught up in autopilot, we're, in other words, asleep. We're just sleepwalking. We're doing the same thing over and over again. Until something wakes us up, we're just going to continue doing the same thing over again. I like that. I like that a lot. Until something wakes us up, we're going to continue doing the same thing over and over again.